Hi, Julie Jones from SSP Performance, Smarter, Stronger, Better Mindset Training, here with this week's Mindset Made Simple Tip of the Week, brought to you by Game Day Sportswear, back in the friendly confines of my office. No Cleveland Clinic building this week, thankfully. But this week we're talking about remembering who is in charge. I'm not a patient person. It's just not how I'm wired. In fact, I'm so impatient that during my time at the Cleveland Clinic this past week when my dad was in the hospital, he was on the 8th floor, and I took the steps every single time. Why? Because the elevator was so slow. I'm talking slow. So 8 floors, that's a hike. And I don't know about you, but steps seem to be difficult regardless of how in shape we think we are. And I think of myself as in pretty good shape for my age. But I was good, walking up till we got up to about 6. Then I started thinking that my glycogen storages were a little low, apparently, from my early morning workouts. And then 7, and then 8, and you get to the top, and you take your heart rate, and you're counting, and you're like, this can't be possible. 145, whoa, wow. Add another lap tomorrow morning in your workout, Jones. Wow, heart rate skyrocketed. And it got me to think about how we manage our state. Last week, I was trying to manage my state mentally, observing and taking in the information that I needed, shifting, thinking about how I can make the situation better at the moment, and then putting in systems so that I could remember what I needed to remember and ask the right questions in hopes that I could help my dad's situation get better. And this week, I started to think about how we manage from the physical side of things. Last week was top-down control. This week we're talking about bottom-up control. I really started thinking about this a couple weeks ago. I was meeting with Portland State softball team, and one of the athletes was talking about this rapid relaxation that we have implemented, or some of them have, to help us sort of realize where we are physically. And basically it's just like, tighten up your muscles and letting them go. And she started thinking about what that meant to her. What it meant was that if she tightened up her muscles and then relaxed them intentionally, it reminded her that she could control her tension and she could also control her relaxation, which is really important when you're getting ready to pitch, or give a presentation, or shoot a foul shot, or take a golf shot, or go for a shot in wrestling, or like my girls Katie and Tessa over in Germany playing for the U.S. soccer team, taking a shot on goal. Managing our tension is vital to our performance. Managing our physiology, which then manages our mental state, is vital to our performance. So as I started thinking about this, I thought, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to see how I can manage my state. So I would take my pulse, and I told myself by the time I get to the place where I need to make a left turn to go down the hall to my dad's room, I'm going to have my heart rate down to about 105, somewhere in there. How do I do it? How would you do it? How did Liv do it before she pitched? We can tighten and relax and realize where we're, my gosh, I didn't realize I was so tight. But what I did was I started to manage my breathing. Because you know as well as I do that when our heart rate gets up, our breathing changes. When we were at Akron, our big rule was you can't lean over while you're doing your conditioning. Because if you did, it obviously meant we needed to do more. Because your breathing rate was so high, or your heart rate was so high, that we're not in good enough shape. That was a fan favorite, of course. And then, of course, they would pretend like they're stretching their hamstrings. But either way, we want to be standing up. We want to be able to manage our heart rate and fill our lungs. So between the time that I came out of the doorway of the staircase, falling out, and then walking down the hallway to get to the other hallway, I could manage my breathing. I started taking deep, long exhales and trying to get my heart rate down. And I'll tell you what, it works. It works. Just like tensing up and then relaxing relaxes our muscles. We realize how tight we were before, and we intentionally, on purpose, purpose, controlled the state we were in. So what's this have to do with what we're doing when we lead, or when we're trying to go and have a great sales meeting, or we're trying to give a presentation, or we're doing anything in which we have to be our best? We can practice this. Get your heart rate up before you practice doing whatever it is that you're doing. If you're going to take a bat, get your heart rate up. Do burpees. Do wind sprints. I actually heard about this years ago. There was a guy that I was reading about that he would run in between golf shots and then get himself to work his heart rate down, get his golf, so he could practice simulating pressure. Because simulating pressure in practice is one of the hardest things that we can do. It's just not the same. So what we need to do is get our heart rate up so high that it starts to affect the way that we think. When we get our heart rate about above 130, 140, we start to go into survival mode. Above 120, we get into not being able to cognitively manage things quite as well. So we have to manufacture that. Well, how do we do that? We increase our heart rate by doing so. Hold your breath. Do the shake it out. If you're a business person, make sure you read my tip at ssbperformance.com, because there's a whole thing you can go through. Guaranteed, it will get your heart rate up. And then you manage your state by controlling your breathing, by controlling your posture, by controlling the tightness of your muscles, whatever works for you. But here's the deal. We get better at the things that we practice. And we rarely practice managing our state under pressure. And ultimately, if we want to be clutch, if there is such a thing, we have to be able to perform under pressure. So if we're going to do that, let's simulate it, let's practice it, and manage it so that when we get there, we know who's in charge. When I got my heart rate down and I walked down that hallway, no matter what I was going to face in that room, and let me tell you, there were some challenging, and still are, we're not out of the woods yet, some challenging moments where I had to be in control of me. I had to be in charge of me, because if I wasn't in charge of me, I couldn't think, I couldn't ask right questions. You know, you've been there. So to be in charge of ourselves, we have to be able to manage stressors and pressure. So we simulate them, we make them up, get our brain in a situation that it's not at its peak ability to think or control our body. We control then from the bottom up, control our heart rate, control our breath work, control our contractions of our muscles, and remind ourselves that even when we feel out of control, we are in charge of us. So how will you do that this week? How will you prep yourself for the next pressure situation? How can you get your heart rate up? How can you manage that and get it back down so that you can be at your optimal level? Even if the whole world's spinning around you, you're in the center of the hurricane where it's calm. Because that is the place that you're going to be your best. So that's our challenge for this week. And I'm still practicing, because we know that our mental toughness and working on our mental performance is a practice. They are skills that we can build moment by moment. We're talking about our physical responses and managing our mental responses to our physical responses, and even changing our physical responses in the end. So think about what you can do with that this week. And in the meantime, manage the moments, and I'll see you next week.